All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Good morning once again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday for this CTAC CTAC meeting for May 29th, 2024. I'm Giovanni Hernandez, Clean Mobility Program Manager with Grid Alternatives of Greater Los Angeles. Next slide, please. So we have a great discussion planned for you all today. Just a quick recap of the meeting agenda. We will provide a quick overview just of the project and of this CTAC, of this advisory committee, just to provide as context for any folks that are joining us for the first time today. Following that, we will provide some quick overall project updates. And then shortly after that, we'll hand it over to our guest presenters for today, which are from CalSTART and SACMed. And we'll have a lively discussion and Q&A portion after their presentations, following with any next steps that we may have, reminders for folks. And as a reminder, and as you probably heard before I got started, this webinar is being recorded. And we will also be providing a link to the recording for folks that were unable to join us, or if you would like to rewatch this at a later time as well. With that, let's kick it off with some team introductions. Again, I'm Giovanni Hernandez with the Clean Mobility Program Manager with the Grid Alternatives Greater Los Angeles office. I'll kick it off to my colleague, Stella.
Thank you, Giovanni. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stella Ursua. I'm the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships here at the LA office of Grid Alternatives. And thank you all so much for joining us today. Should I hand it over to Kristen? Or CalSTART, I'm sorry, or Kristen. Sorry about
No problem. Good morning, everyone. My name is Kristen Bush. I am with the Electric Power Research Institute's Electric Transportation team. So I'm glad to have you on the call. And then I'll pass it to Tuan.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Tuan Chi. I'm a project manager here at CalSTART in the Clean Fuels and Infrastructure team. I'll pass it to Giovanna.
Hi, I'm Giovanna Escamilla. I'm an associate project manager here at CalSTART, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'll pass it to Lisa.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa. Good morning. Thanks for joining. I facilitate project outreach at CalSTART. And I think that might be the rest of our introductions.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And I'll hand it back to Gia for a quick project overview.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm sure you've all heard this before, but just a quick refresher. ETRUC's purpose as a project is to create a California research hub to facilitate and accelerate the electrification of the heavy-duty drayage vehicle market. Our goals and objectives include advancing the research, development, and demonstration needed to extend the delivery range of heavy-duty battery electric trucks. We also aim to engage broad stakeholders to ensure that ETRUC utilizes a community feedback and input to promote community engagement and workforce development with a community-first approach. And lastly, the project aims to plan, design, and deploy innovative public corridor charging strategies for battery electric trucks, and this is beginning with drayage.
Thank you. Next slide, please, Gia. All right. And again, I believe we do have one or two folks that may be new to this space. And so again, want to just provide a little bit of that background for folks that are new. So a little bit of context for this advisory committee of the Community First Technology Advisory Committee, CTAC for short. Our goal is to use a community first engagement framework to ensure that pollution impacted underserved and tribal communities are involved in creating and guiding this initiative. And so that includes, helping to inform the project on community engagement, on needs, and impact, helping us with the dissemination as well and solicitation of input on project activities, promotion of equity in priority communities, and really just fostering a community-driven partnership for technology and zero-emission freight corridor development, planning, and site prioritization. And so feedback at every phase of this project from our stakeholders, from community members, is really critical in the implementation of our community engagement goals, et cetera, et cetera. And so leading up to corridor planning, we really want to make sure we're getting as much feedback as possible to help guide this initiative and this project. And so in short, that is the aim here. We'll kick it off now back to Gia for some quick project updates.
Okay, thank you. So beginning with our industry partner webinar series, thank you for everyone who joined us for the May 1st one. This was on Drainage 101. We just want to let you know that the meeting recording and the slide deck are now on the website in case you missed that or wanted to go back to that. And our next one will be on November 6th. This is going to be surrounding EV site planning 101. So please join us. You'll get an invitation to that sometime in the near future. For the Advanced Transportation Research Center, this high-power charging lab will be completed and ready to begin phase 1 testing very soon in Pomona, California. For the pilot demonstration sites, construction will begin mid-2024 in Carson and Ontario. A big part of our project right now, we have the regional freight heat map, so you can go ahead and check this out on the eTruck website if you want to explore existing and in development medium and heavy duty battery electric vehicle charging stations and current truck charging locations. And you can find us on all of our socials if you scan that QR code right there. And the first one will take you to the heat map. So we're really proud of that, and go check it out. And I'll pass it back over to you, Giovanni.
Yeah, and just the last thing on the heat map that Gia mentioned, there will be another communication coming out from the team around just, and if any feedback that anyone has, we're accepting feedback until the end of this week, which is the end of the month. So would love for anyone who hasn't checked out that heat map, go take a look at it and provide us your input there, any feedback that you may have. Thank you, Gia. So this last update that I have here before we kick it off to our guest presenters for today is just around the CBO stipend opportunity that we launched a couple of months ago. So we have received applications, right? And so for, again, a little bit of context, we will be selecting 6 community-based organizations, 3 on the CTAC side for this advisory committee, and 3 on the WEDAC side for the Workforce Development Advisory Committee side. And provide a small stipend, right, for ongoing participation in the project, but such as attendance at meetings, assisting us with outreach to stakeholders and soliciting feedback, surveying, promotion of the project, et cetera, et cetera. And also, providing us with feedback on the implementation of these activities throughout a 1-year period, right? And so we will be making that announcement of who we will be selecting by the end of this week. So, either tomorrow or Thursday, Friday, the latest, we will make an announcement to those that were selected and of course to everyone that has applied, so they know what the decision is. So just wanted to provide that in case there are folks that are on this call that applied. You will be hearing back this week on a decision. And then just due to some delays that we experienced, we had to adjust the collaboration timeline. Originally it was from May 2024 to May 2025. Given that we're going to be making finally the announcement of those who are selected this week, we still need to, sign MOUs, et cetera, et cetera. So it just makes sense that we tweak the collaboration period from June 2024 to June 2025. So quick little update on that. And I wanted to pause to see if there was any questions that anyone had on the CBO stipend before we move on. All right. Seeing none, we will proceed. So thank you, Gia, for that. So I'm very excited to introduce our guest speakers for today. Felicia Lucas from CalSTART and Jaime Lemus from Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District, SACMED for short, if I'm saying the acronym correctly. But Felicia Lucas is a proud native New Mexican and is the Deputy Director for Tribal Affairs at CalSTART. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in Geography and Environmental Studies from the University of New Mexico and a graduate certificate in GIS and Geospatial Technology from the University of Miami. Since 2010, she has applied this knowledge through a diverse portfolio in clean transportation, historical preservation, conservation, and the utility industry. Felicia is a lifelong steward of the natural environment and is committed to bringing steadfast and meaningful change to Indian country and underserved communities. She has a holistic understanding of the complex challenges facing our terrestrial home and aims to continue making a positive impact through intuitive, sound decisions rooted in experience and pragmatism. Jaime Lemus is a descendant of the Purepecha indigenous people of Michoacán, Mexico. In 1998, Jaime attended UC Davis, where he began his research on air pollution and environmental degradation. Jaime started his career at the Sacramento Metropolitan Air Quality Management District in 2001, and since has gained a wide breadth of experience working in multiple divisions in various capacities. He was appointed as Director of Transportation and Climate Change Division in September of 2019, and now leads the SAC Metro Air District in advancing innovative transportation and land use strategies in the region to mitigate climate impact and improve regional air quality. Really excited to hear both of your presentations. I'll hand it off to Felicia. Thank you all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you everybody for kicking us off and for the warm introduction, Giovanni. And I really appreciate the eTruck team putting this together. As many of you may know, Indian country is on the precipice of monumental and steadfast change. And there's a historic amount of money that has been deemed as once in a generation that is actually going to be invested across native lands. So for today, I'm really going to get into some best practices, highlight some projects and points of consideration when engaging with and working with tribes and tribal governments. Next slide, please. CalSTART is a nonprofit and has been around for about 30 years, and it has worked nationally and internationally to develop clean, efficient transportation solutions, as well as a number of pilot projects and incentive programs for emerging technologies. And we have a 300 plus member base, which has really allowed us to connect with each other, learn from some of the most intelligent people in the industry, and really take that expertise that we have from our members and integrate that into our work and our programs. And as the industry does continue to grow, so has the need for the pace and our areas of focus needed to change. And my role really did come out of that change, in that when I first started at CalSTART, I actually used to run and work with telematic data that you'll find on vehicles and for our HVIC program. And using that telematic data and coupling it with applicant and awardee data, I would run a spatial analysis every month to see where those vehicles were first being deployed. And the first time I did that exercise, despite the HFIP's 10-year tenure and 11,000 vouchers being deployed, not one of those vouchers hit Indian country. And so I decided to look into that and learn that the explanation wasn't as straightforward as, you know, one might think, and it was actually due to some unperceived challenges. Next slide, please. So much to my surprise, some of the unique challenges of living in California is that despite California has been consecutively the 5th ranked largest economy in the world, I learned that the enthusiasm for EVs, that there's still some hesitancy to adopt this new technology for various reasons. And one that I'm sure many of you are familiar with is the term range anxiety. There's also infrastructure deficiencies, and sourcing of critical minerals for batteries is also a contentious subject. And I was also surprised to learn that grid connectivity is still a challenge for many tribes. And that is something that is not specific or unique to just California, but is really felt across the entire US. And since most tribes are actually rural, they are considered to be at the end of the line or last mile of many utility companies. So what that really means is that if there is a high wind or fire season, they are some of the first to experience blackouts in the event that a utility has to turn off power for safety considerations. And then where does that leave people? And finally, funding, this third item here, really does remain a hurdle and a challenge for many tribes in terms of access. So there's a lot of money out there, but accessing it can be somewhat difficult. And as someone who recently went through pursuing federal funding myself, I can firmly attest to the process being somewhat nebulous, with very strict deadlines that are challenging to meet, even for some of the even well-resourced organizations with business development departments. And on top of that, there are often cost share stipulations that the tribe needs to meet in order to participate. That is difficult to ask unless the tribe has some form of liquid capital. And tribes involved in gaming tend to have a slight advantage over other tribes that do not have gaming as a revenue generator. And they are some of the easier tribes to reach out to and get them into the EV or clean energy pipeline, because they're kind of well established and they're able to put money towards clean climate goals and climate plans. And these last two items here that I have listed under the funding access are staffing restraints and language barriers. So most tribal members wear many hats within their tribe. They may be the accountant, they may also be a teacher and a tribal council member. So it is oftentimes very difficult to find time to apply for funding that has such short windows. And the last one here is language actually still may be a barrier. And many tribes, fortunately, have been able to preserve their language and remain somewhat insular. And with that tends to come with only speaking your native tongue. Next slide, please. So going into these, I typically try not to sound doom and gloom, but the reality is that these are very real challenges. But I do believe that there is hope and a path forward to these challenges, as I mentioned on the previous slide. And one of those items is outreach is number one, and meeting tribes where they are, and I mean that in the quite literal sense, physically going to where they're located, because it's very difficult and challenging for them to actually go meet you. And also it's very important to have tailored messaging. And utility tribal liaisons are often good points of contact to meet with, as they have that direct line to tribes and are also trusted by the tribe as well. And another avenue is to work directly with tribal organizations and CBOs, as they often have experience and understand some of the cultural nuance that may be lost on others that are not, super familiar with this space and have worked with tribes in the past. So that's something that's definitely important to keep in mind. And then, as I mentioned, this historic amount of funding that's available So the BIL, the IIJA, and other state funding opportunities are here. And there's so much money that's actually reserved for tribes to help with infrastructure and the grid build out. And then lastly, I would like to add that many times rural areas are often overlooked when considering investments of EV infrastructure. And I have to kindly remind people that people live and work there too. And if we're really going to bring everyone into the fold, we need to focus some of our resources on some of our rural communities as well. And what I find that's really interesting about rural communities is that many of them are often close to tourist destinations and near major highway networks. So to me, that seems like they'd be prime for having, if you want to expand out the grid and highway networks, that would be the best place to start. So I like to put into perspective for people. So think, you know, since we're here in California, think of the 99, which runs through Fresno and on your way to Yosemite. And that's only about an hour out from Yosemite. And then also I-40, which is our major corridor that runs east and west. And if you're traveling on that going through Arizona, you're only about an hour out from the Grand Canyon. And there are several rural communities there and a few native ones as well, and are definitely worth the investment. Next slide, please. So here are a few examples of the energy transition in practice. So I always like to highlight a few of these just to not harp on, you know, all the travesty and the sad things that happen in Indian country. There's also some positive things that happen there as well. And Light Up Navajo is underway and will bring electricity to families across Navajo Nation to support the build out of the infrastructure to connect households to the grid. And last I checked, about 800 homes have been electrified and have gone through this program. However, there are still about 10,000 homes within Navajo Nation that need that infrastructure built out. And it's incredibly expensive. It's some residents have received quotes for $10,000 to $20,000. And when your average income is less than $20,000, you know, you do the math, the money's just not there. And so I really like to be mindful of selling the EV idea to those who still need some of the basic needs and met, like having access to running water and electricity. And then the second one here is Blue Lake Rancheria, which is also a beacon of hope in Northern California, as a tribe demonstrated a robust renewable-based microgrid system, complete with solar power and solar power generation and battery storage that has withstood blackouts. And because Blue Lake actually worked with the utility with PG&E, they were able to divert power to a hospital that was not located on tribal land when there was a major power outage due to the heavy torrential rains and fires a couple of years back. And then finally, another one that I'd like to highlight in terms of landscape changes are clean energy tribal summits. Those really do provide the opportunity for tribes and tribal leaders to connect with one another, as well as touch and see current and emerging technologies. The Department of Energy hosts one every 2 years, and tribes from all across the US are in attendance. And it is essentially a big gathering or powwow of everybody and a mix of cultures. And it's just wonderful to see all the different faces of Indian country. And I will also add too that CalSTART actually co-hosted the Clean Energy Tribal Summit last year with all the major California utilities. And we are invited to do that again this year. So I'm really excited about that. And we'll be hosting another vehicle and technology showcase in August. Next slide, please. So I may be getting a little bit short on time, but here are some of the best practices that I'd like to keep front of mind when you engage early with tribes and really include them throughout the process. As approval for infrastructure projects, you know, changes that mean a whole great deal to the whole tribe actually requires consent and approval through the entire tribal council or government. And what I've learned actually is that oftentimes EV projects, clean energy items, those are usually bottom of the rung whenever the tribe meets. The things that are usually high priority are infrastructure, healthcare, education. And most decisions are made by the entire tribe and not just a lone individual, something that we may actually be accustomed to in our line of work. So with that in mind, I really encourage people to go into this with an open mind and acknowledge that Western values are different from Native values, and that land is considered sacred to many Native peoples. Wahalia Johns, who is the director at the Office of Indian Energy, said it best when she quoted her grandmother. She said, "Take care of the land and it will take care of you," which is something that really does resonate across Indian country. And then finally, if you are planning to work with a number of partners, be sure that you are working with someone who is on the up and up. If that trust has not been established by the tribe, then a project will not move forward, no matter how appealing it is. And next slide, please. So here are my contact details. Thank you very much for your time today. And I always like to end on a small homework note. All this land that we work and live on was once tribal land, and I encourage you to learn some history about those land you are standing on today, and really learn a little bit about their history, their origins, their creation stories, because although many tribes are neighbors on a map, they are all unique with different aspirations and goals for their tribe. And really, despite all that tribes have endured and been through over the last 500 years, they really do remain a proud and resilient people. And I am not saying that what you will come across when you read some history is going to be cupcakes and rainbows. Some of the things that you'll actually read will be difficult to read. But if you take me up on my offer, you will come across stories of courage, hope, laughter, creativity, and joy. And I think you'll be better for it. And with that, I will go ahead and thank you all one last time. So last slide. And I will get off my soapbox and turn it over to you, Jaime. Thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. And that's pretty inspiring of you, Felicia. I always like your challenges. So good morning, everybody. My name is Jaime Lemos, and I'm the director of the Transportation and Climate Change Division at the SAC Metro Air District. And so in this presentation, I'm really bringing kind of my perspective of my professional role here at the agency, and then also a very personal role or personal, of what I do in our communities and for our Indigenous communities here in the region. Next slide, please. So as Felicia mentioned, right, there is some history here with the U.S. government. Many of it, has not been so great. And so one of the things I like to really highlight is about trust and distrust. In my case, I represent a government agency, which many tribal organizations and tribes in general, there's a lot of mistrust there because of broken promises, just lots of different ways that government has not behaved very well with tribes, right? And even still till today, right? There's a lot of efforts where tribes are seeking help from government, and then just government kind of falls short. There's a picture here that says, protect, act, or pass. That's a picture I took at an area where I go to one of our most sacred ceremonies. And this area is in Nevada, which is where there is the largest proposed mine for lithium, right? And so here I am in my role as someone who is advocating for EVs and zero emission. And the EVs contain lithium ion batteries, right? And so where are we going to extract the lithium from? And so, we talk as a community and society about doing better for environment, but really, this is about doing better for everybody, right? Bringing awareness, there's a lot of unintended consequences that come with a lot of this, like lithium mining extraction. For instance, one of those is man camps. You get a lot of folks that come into a region, like in this case, Fort McDermott, Nevada, and there's going to be a lot of folks coming in from outside of that area, mostly men, that are coming in as miners. And so the next thing you know, we call these man camps. And then as a result of that, we can have missing and murdered Indigenous women and peoples. And I want to highlight that because a lot of people do not know about MMIP, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Peoples efforts, and May 5th, we just passed this, was the National Day of Action. So I want to highlight that because these are some of those unintended consequences that really are very real and impact Indian country, right? So we have to, really listen. We have to pay attention to the communities, to the tribes, because this is not their first rodeo, right? We've been here before. We've seen it with other extraction. We've seen it with other type of resources, and so we know, right? Another one is cannabis, right? That's really big on Indian country now. You got to learn to listen to the stories. There are elders, there are lots of community story keepers who will tell you all of the challenges and all of the community needs through storytelling. So be patient and listen, and you'll learn a lot from how they make decisions, to what's important, to who those story keepers are and who those decision makers are, or who are influential in those communities, right? And then also too, they'll tell you about other investments that have come in and what's happened, right? Sometimes you'll see abandoned sites or abandoned grow areas, they'll tell you about those. So we have to be really thoughtful and mindful about, the community and the people's stories, right? So next slide, please. And really, when you listen to a lot of the needs and priorities, it's really about the basics, right? Felicia mentioned, right? Healthcare, transportation, and food access, right? Education, medical access. Those are really the top priorities in Indian country, right? And there's this big misconception. The tribe has a casino. Yeah, well, they're still developing. They're still a developing tribe, right? It doesn't mean that they're providing resources for everybody. It doesn't mean that they have capacity for everything. So keep that in mind as well, because that's one of the kind of points that I bring to some of our elected officials is like, oh, there's a tribal casino coming up, let's hit them up for this or for that. And it's like, hey, hold on a second. Let's get them, have them build their foundation, right? And let's be a partner with them as opposed to asking already for resources, right? Again, as I mentioned, right, the needs are very simple. In this case, my example is transportation. And so in some of the projects that we do here in underserved communities, right, where there's lots of Indigenous communities or peoples, is we push EV charging or we push electric vehicles, right, so that they could clean the air. But really, that comes secondary, right? It's really the transportation need as they need to get everywhere, right? Sometimes, most of the time, they live in transportation deserts. So they need transportation. That's key for work, for education, for doctor's appointments, for everything. So let's pay attention to what those needs are, right? And then, of course, we get all the additional benefits that come with that. If we address the priority needs, then we can also get those secondary benefits like EVs, which are zero emission, right? We can look at green sector jobs and how do we benefit the local economy. And we can begin starting to look at other climate resiliency type of action or work and bringing in different types of energy projects as well. Next slide, please. I want to highlight this project because this is the project that we worked on in an underserved community, and it really has taken off as a catalyst to many other components as we began listening to community needs. The idea was to build an electric lowrider, right? And really the idea came from from a car sharing program that we had, where we started putting car share programs, or EVs, free EV transportation programs in underserved communities, right? And so there was just a lot of things that happened with that, right? Community needed to learn about EVs, community needed to adapt and adopt EVs. And then also too, some of the feedback was that the community was like, they didn't really like the cars, right? They weren't like culturally relevant, right? They were kind of dorky little, Chevy Bolts and Nissan Leafs, right? And so we said, well, let's create something that's culturally appropriate. So we looked at building an electric lowrider, and the community adopted it right away, right? And so one of the things that really stemmed from this was a workforce pipeline. We started working with a high school student to develop the project. We started building an EV curriculum. The class just started booming. Everybody wanted to take this class. But then we also noticed that those are sons and daughters of the local auto body shop owners in those underserved corridors, right? And so now we're starting to create more capacity for those community businesses to start working on electric vehicles, right? It promoted STEM, it's starting to promote ZEVs in the community, and also creating a multi-generational adoption, right? So when we look at communities, right, we have to look at kind of be forward thinking, as we could look at the positive and the benefits of this. Like in this case, where we're starting to build EV curriculums to really target a workforce pipeline. But then also we really have to think about the unintended consequences. Like, what are we pushing there? And what is this going to do for land? And what is this going to do for water? And what do our elders, what do the community elders and story keepers say to us about these things? And so anyways, I just really appreciative of this time. Next slide, please. And, as I bring both of those worlds together, my professional role, but also my community capacity role. So with that, I leave you this. This is my contact information. And just thank you again for this opportunity, and just always happy to share with Felicia and the CalSTART team and the GRID team. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Felicia and Jaime, for this wonderful and powerful presentation from each of you. Really giving us a lot to digest, to think about in how this project moves forward, and really like what to consider when engaging, tribal communities. And so this overview, examples that you all provided, I can't describe it in any other way than just powerful, right? And I feel like I also need time to process everything that you all said and take it all in. But really, really appreciative of your time, your expertise, and sharing all that with us. We do have some prepared questions for you all, but at this time also, we want to encourage attendees to ask any of their questions as well. So you can enter it into the chat, or you can raise your hand, like I see Ms. Jackie Badejo just did, and you can come off mute and ask your questions as well. So I see that we have Jackie, and then we also have Eileen. Why don't we go ahead and take some questions we have from our attendees? So Jackie, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, everyone, Grand Risings. And I would just like to say thank you very much, Felicia and Jaime. This has been my favorite presentation here in this space. It hit on so many things that I myself have spoken on, but could not have expressed it better. I just want to commend you on the great work that you're doing. I could hear and feel the passion and the struggle, because it's real. And I believe too that when we think about the tribal communities, it also overlays on the other additional communities, especially BIPOC communities who face the same issues. And as a person who sits on the AB 617 for South LA, through the Air Coast, South Coast AQMD, Jaime, I did have a a question for you. Do you have any AB 617 communities? And like, have you engaged them in any way relative to electrification? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. And thank you for all your work and effort down in the Southern California region on AB 617. We do have an AB 617 community. And right now, currently, it's in the middle of transitioning into a community emission reduction program community. So we're starting to talk about projects, right? I will share with you that, as how I look, long hair, everything, speak Spanish, a champion in community advocacy. In my role as government, there is still, I face that distrust, right? It's like, are you coming at us from the air district? Or are you coming at us from community, right? And so, so you're right, the struggle is very real, right? And so my challenge is to push here internally with our agency to help better understand the staff and the team on the community needs, but also to educate community on much of the red tape, that there's government processes and guidelines of programs and everything. And so this year we are excited that we're going to transition. I think one of the things that's really been helpful with me is that I on a regular meet with a lot of community organization leaders, and I have coffee with them, and when they invite for different events, I attend, even if it's after hours. Like, I attend on the personal level, right? Because one, I'm from the South Sacramento community, and two, that's my community in general, right? And so so it's always important for me to go, as even if I'm an ambassador to the agency, but to be a champion for community, right? And so we are pushing really the needs of community. We've been talking with them for a long time already about just transportation deserts. That's really is, how do we get better transportation? How do we reduce congestion in corridors that are just awful, that have no crosswalks and all that stuff? And then how do we get our kids to school? As you know, many communities, kids are still not getting to school because of lack of transportation. So that's another target that we're also addressing.
Thank you so much for your question, Ms. Jackie. I see that Eileen also had her hand up. Eileen, you want to go ahead and come off mute and ask your question?
Yeah, I'd love to. So first of all, Jaime and Felicia, thank you so much for presenting. Really appreciate it. It was super informative, super interesting, and really meaningful. So I work for the Gateway Cities Council of Governments, which represents 27 jurisdictions in Southeast LA County, and a lot of our cities are very disadvantaged, and a lot of them actually have a lot of hesitancy with EV adoption because they're worried about gentrification with the oncoming infrastructure, right? And they worry that, these EVs are not for them. Therefore, wealthier people that come in and, raising rents. And so I really loved your example, Jaime, specifically about the EV lowriders and just kind of the cultural sensitivity that was integrated into the adoption of electric vehicles. Because like you said, they're not like particularly glamorous, right? But if you make them fit the culture, as opposed to trying to make the community fit the vehicle, then it's a lot more effective, right? So my question for you is, what are some kind of best practices to sort of make sure that EV vehicle adoption is reflective of the community, as opposed to trying to force the community to adopt EV vehicles?
Yeah, that's really challenging. Yeah, because I think about my parents, right? And then how do we get them in an EV, right? And my mom right away will say like, oh, that's so like a future rocket spaceship, I think there are champions within our communities that really will drive this zero emission adoption, right? I mean, we pushed for this electric lowrider because we heard communities say, Like, man, there's just nothing out there that looks cool for us, right? And we had to ensure to the community that we are not trying to electrify all the lowriders. Like, that is not the goal. Like, I have a lowrider and I don't want mine electrified, right? Because that's the other challenge, right? It's like, how much is too much, right? And so we were able to get the support of the lowrider clubs to adopt it, right? But the reason they adopted it was not because of the transformation of that lowrider into zero emission. It was innovation, and it was about their kids getting involved with STEM. And so that was really why they adopted. And so those are the key kind of like, points that you have to look at community is like, what are they going to embrace? And then what are they going to champion? I always try to tell our communities is like, for many, many years, we have been underserved and underfunded in our poor and underserved communities. As Felicia mentioned, these are times right now where there's like billions of dollars focused on underserved communities. And this is the time where we can finally get out of that negative, that hole, and try to get our communities to parity. But being conscious of not gentrifying. Like, it's got to be community led, community embraced, community driven, and it's got to look like community, right? So that's the big challenge of balance.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you for your question, Eileen. And again, I encourage anyone else that has questions, please raise your hand, put them in the chat. We do have some prepared question ourselves for the panelists. So in the meantime, while we field for other questions or as others come in from our attendees, want to go ahead and ask our panelists here some questions. How do we better learn, preserve, and integrate tribal knowledge into medium and heavy duty truck electrification, right? So kind of connecting it to this project of e-truck, which is focused right on medium duty, heavy duty trucks. Just wanted to pose that question to you both of how we can better learn, preserve, and integrate tribal knowledge into medium duty and heavy duty truck electrification.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and take the first stab. So I really think going into this, knowing that tribes are the original stewards of the land, and as you spend time in nature, you begin to realize patterns, and you begin to live and work and thrive within nature rather than against it. So if we're really going to curb the climate crisis, we're going to have to listen to those who came before us, and listening to our elders and listening to their knowledge and how we should perceive the world and how we need to work within it. And I will add too that this year's tribal summit that was hosted by the Department of Energy that I mentioned earlier today, this year's theme was actually called Tribes Leading the Way. And I think now more than ever, or for the first time ever really, at the federal level and even coming from the White House, they realize now that Indigenous knowledge is something that we need to start integrating and be mindful of as we transition to this new green economy, electrification, hydrogen, choose your fancy. So yeah.
I would also like to add, I mean, that's a key point, tribes being stewards of the land. I think too, there's a little bit of a misconception. I think sometimes, and I mentioned this earlier about tribal casinos, right? That if there's a tribal casino, that they have a lot of capacity and funding. I think that's a really good starting point. I think that means that they're looking at their economics, they're looking at their capacity building, and I think that that's a good start, right? So how does somebody become a partner, right? How does someone become a partner? So in a partnership, right, there's I always tell the team, we have relationships, you can have a partner relationship or we can have a contractor relationship, right? Felicia and I are good friends and we're partners. She asks of me and I do with nothing in return. I ask of her sometimes, and she helps with nothing in return, right? That's a partnership. And then, you could be a contractor where I just pay you, right? I think one of the things that's really important is to be a partner, right? We want to be partners. As you become partners, you gain trust. You'll find out that tribal communities, we love our trucks, right? The Ford Lightning, the Chevy Silverado, there is a lot of opportunity there, right? But they're very expensive still, right? And you can't take them off road 100 miles out, load them full of wood or other things that you got to gather and bring them back, right?
Mhm.
So we have to still be a little considerate about that kind of stuff. But let me tell you, you put those Ford Lightnings or Chevy Silverados that are electric, or any type of truck like that that's electric, they will love it and they will use the heck out of it, right?
Mhm.
So we got to figure out how to be a partner and reduce that cost. I think the other thing too is what is the future going to look like for them as we introduce these electric trucks? There's a lot of really good opportunity. I think, truck technicians, EV charging technicians.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of work and a lot of opportunity for job access in some of the tribal communities. So they leave, right? They leave and they go out to study, they go out to work, and sometimes they don't come back, right? So, one of the things that I like to push here in our region is let's keep our capacity and our resources. We have to think about that too in our tribal communities. Let's help them reach capacity and empowerment so they can keep those resources there and so that they could continue to benefit their own communities and their own families.
Yes, really, really important. Thank you both for your responses, and Jaime, thank you for elevating the workforce side of things. That is very important. It's very important to this project, to this work, which is why we have a separate advisory committee that's solely focused on the workforce side of things, and trying to think about recommendations for future curriculums and trainings in this sector. And certainly ensuring that it gets to our tribal nations is also important, right? And an equitable practice, right? As we move forward with this project. And there's that certainly a lot of that upskilling and opportunities that could be provided to many tribal communities. I see that Ms. Stella has a question here. I'll go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Stella.
Thank you, Giovanni, and thank you, Jaime and Felicia, again for the wonderful presentations. I just wanted to kind of tack on to what Jaime just stated. Jaime, we are dealing with, a number of requests for grid alternatives to create workforce development programs in different parts of California, different regions. And because of all the money that's out there, I believe that's, people are starting to open their eyes to all these opportunities. And so we're trying really hard to do that. And so this project, the e-truck project as well, we've been talking about that, as Giovanni just mentioned. We have a workforce development advisory committee as well. So if you have any suggestions for that side of this project, that would be extremely valuable to us, because it's going to be really difficult to open 20 more centers, right? We have about 6-7 offices here in California, and we're hoping that we can provide those resources to every area, every region out there. But that's the challenge, to be in all these places. We know it's critical, though, to have these centers, to have these opportunities, these curriculums, these programs that are connected to community colleges, right? So that there's educational and career pathways as well. So I really appreciate your comments there, Jaime. Thank you.
I think I have time for one more question here. I wanted to know if, so Felicia, you mentioned, you provided some examples in your presentation of, for example, Light Up Navajo, the Blue Lake Rancheria, some projects there of building out infrastructure. And so I'm curious if there are any existing clean transportation projects in tribal communities that you both may be aware of, right, in California, that you can point us to that we can look into for best practices recommendations, if there are any right now, or I don't know, maybe they're all just about right now currently focused on building the infrastructure, right? The grid, right? Which I see you nodding your head, which is probably where the current status of it is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Department of Energy has a lot of really great resources, and what they have actually is that they have an online interactive map that shows all the projects that are happening within California or across the nation. And there are about 40 energy projects in California right now that are tribal led. And the majority of them are, as you guessed, are more focused on kind of the basic energy transition. Because, as I mentioned, that tribes don't really have, a lot of tribes are rural, and with that comes the caveat that they don't have access to the grid typically. So, but there are some exciting things happening. The Pascatena Band of Indians has actually been prioritizing clean energy since 2018, and they really tried to get off the PG&E wagon and really wanted to provide and regulate their own energy and electricity. And that project, I believe, uses a couple solar panel PV systems, and what really happens once they kind of get some of these other projects online, that then creates that easier pipeline to install charging infrastructure.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention and highlight a brother that Felicia and the DOE introduced us to, Robert Blake, with Native Sons Community Power Development. That guy, he is all energy all over the Midwest, and we're trying to get him to California, but he's creating this electric, powwow highway, and going from tribal community to tribal community. And so, he's not in California yet, but definitely someone that we want to work with. I'm currently working with Navajo Pipelines and on hydrogen production. So that's another thing we didn't really talk too much about in today's presentation, but as we look at heavy duty, trucking, fuel cell hydrogen trucks is something that's very real, and something that there's a lot of funding for as well. And so there are tribes now, like the Redding tribe up north of California, and some of the southern tribes that are starting to really look at hydrogen production and create a coalition on some of this. I think, when we think about, talking to some of these partners and trying to get in contact with some of these folks, just keeping in mind of this whole partnership development, but then also too is like, coming with good intentions with no asks from the very beginning, like, let's connect. What are you about and what are priority needs, right? And so I wanted to mention that right before we get off, because I think, when I met with the Navajo Nation, we met for coffee and donuts, and it was no asks, and just starting to learn a little bit about them, and now we're really great partners. So wanted to also highlight that as well.
Absolutely. No, and thank you for that last tidbit there. Super important in the process of building trust and rapport, for sure. So thank you for reminding us of that. All right, with that, we have actually gone over a little bit of time. I feel like we can go on more. I have more questions. I feel like others may have more questions as well, but we got to keep it moving and respect everyone's time. So we cannot thank you enough, Felicia and Jaime, for your time and for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience with us. We are deeply appreciative of you both. So with that, I just want to close this out. Our next CTAC meeting is scheduled for August 28th, 1 hour, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. And we also, as Gia mentioned in our project updates, have scheduled our next webinar series that's open to the public, that is focused on EV Site Planning 101. That'll take place on November 6th. And then in a couple of days, we will follow up with the whole CTAC group with a copy of the presentation and a link to the recording so folks can rewatch or catch it if they were unable to make it today. So with that, thank you all so much. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Felicia, Jaime. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.